All right, now we're starting to fill up our chart. We're going to start over here with the build up to the Declaration. Okay, and the first thing we're going to write is the First Continental Congress. So first Continental Congress, October 1774. Now, the First Continental Congress was a meeting of representatives from all over the colonies, every colony except Georgia, and they met in Philadelphia to talk about all of the troubles and the tensions and the events, all of those things that we covered, Boston Massacre, all those things that we covered, Intolerable Act, Stamp Act, all those things in the video on the causes of the American Revolution. So they met to talk about all of these things. And there's a lot of worry. What's going on? Where are we headed? Okay. They drafted what's called the Declaration of Rights. Declaration of Rights. And that was a petition to the King of England for more rights. They also came up with a compromise. They decided to continue the boycott of English products, but they also decided to raise a colonial militia and have that militia begin to prepare for war. So they were thinking as early as October 1774, these delegates from the colonies were thinking about war, possibility of war with England. Now, the second thing we need to put on our list is the first fighting. And two well-known events happened at about the same time. So we have Paul Revere's Ride and Lexington and Concord. And that's April 1775. April 1775. All right. So these happened almost simultaneously, about the same time. Now, King George ignored that petition, that Declaration of Rights. And about the same time, Great Britain learned that the colonies were keeping weapons in the city of Concord. It's a little city. It's about 20 miles outside of the city of Boston in Massachusetts. And the British decided to go and take those weapons. Well, the Sons of Liberty, you've heard me mention the Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty, it's Sam Adams' group. They learned of the British plan. Paul Revere, he was a silversmith in Boston, but he was active with the Patriot cause. And he asked this man named Robert Newman, no relation to me, to watch the British from the top of the Old North Church. Maybe you've heard this story. Hang one lantern if you see them, the British Army moving by land. Hang two lanterns if you see them moving by sea. So one by land, two by sea. Well, Newman saw the army rowing across the Charles River. Charles River is a major river in the city of Boston. He hung two lanterns. Two riders took off, not just Revere. It was two riders, Paul Revere and William Dawes. And they took off to go alert the countryside that the British troops were coming. And so that's Paul Revere's Ride. And they were headed to Concord, and they passed through the town of Lexington. And at the town, this is the British troops. And the Redcoats, they were marching. They get to Lexington, and they meet colonial militia. And the militia engaged the Redcoats in this little town. It's not exactly sure who fired first, but they call it the shot heard around the world. And that was the beginning of the American Revolution, April 1775. Well, the militia loses, the colonial militia loses. The Redcoats go on to Concord. They discover that the weapons had been moved. Redcoats set fire to some buildings. And the Minutemen charge, and the Redcoats retreat, and they suffer some casualties. So that was the beginning of the war. Now, remember, we're not going to go through every event, just events that they're the ones in the teaks. And if you get asked the question on the test, it's going to be about one of these events. So it's good to have a working knowledge of these things. Now, what's next on our list? The Second Continental Congress. Second Continental Congress. So the First Continental Congress didn't meet for a very long time. It was just kind of like the introductory meeting. Second Continental Congress, they met for a much longer period of time. This is May 1775, over a year, in fact, they met. And what happened here in the beginning of the Second Continental Congress? They appoint George Washington as head of the Continental Army. That was a big deal because it was George Washington. They send what's known as the Olive Branch Petition to the king, and as a final bid for peace, and the king ignores it. So we have to keep that in mind. They try once again. They had just sent the Declaration of Rights to ask for more rights. The king ignored that one. They send the, well, I don't have it up there, the Olive Branch Petition. That's the Second Continental Congress. The king ignores that petition for peace. All right, so we have another battle here. About the same time, Second Continental Congress is starting to meet. We have the Battle of Bunker Hill. May 1775. And at the Battle of Bunker Hill, it's outside of Boston. There's some high areas, land areas outside of Boston. It was just north of Boston. Patriot Army had to retreat. It was running out of ammunition. So the British soldiers won, but they lost. The British Army lost twice as many soldiers as the Patriots, as the Continental Army. So this battle showed to the Continental Army that they could hold their own with the well-trained, well-funded British Army. All right, so that's the Battle of Bunker Hill. What's next on our list is we're building up to the Constitution. To the Declaration of Independence. Constitution's not for quite a while. All right, Common Sense. It was a book. Common Sense. January 1776. By a man named Thomas Paine. This was an influential book. Sold a lot of copies. Kind of a leaflet, really. Sold a lot of copies. It was widely circulated. It was influential in moving public sentiment away from sticking with England and towards independence. So it was certainly on the patriot side. So it was a big deal in helping move public opinion. All right, next on our list is we're building up. 1774, 1776. We're in 1776 already. Battle of Dorchester Heights. We got two battles here. Dorchester Heights. Not well known. Dorchester Heights, March 1776. Then we have this other Battle of New York. It's just after that. When it's June 1776. One was a victory and one was a defeat for the colonial army. The Battle of Dorchester Heights was a victory. George Washington forced the British out of the city of Boston, and they had to retreat into Canada. So the Patriot Army was able to capture or recapture the city of Boston, but they lost. George Washington lost at New York, Battle of New York. The Redcoat Army under William Howe, they pushed the colonials out of New York and made a retreat to New Jersey. And during these battles, don't know if you'll get asked this, but there was an officer named Nathan Hale. I regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. He he was arrested. He was caught rather as a spy. He was hanged. He was a young colonial officer caught with some secret documents on him. He was working as a spy at the time. Just in case you get asked about that, don't know if you will. So, win Boston, lose New York, right? We're building up. Notice we're in June 1776. Now we're at July 1776, Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence, July. The Second Continental Congress had been in session. Not saying they met there every day, all the time, but they had been in session since May 1775. A year later, just over a year later, the draft, it's Thomas Jefferson is the main author. Ben Franklin helped, and some other authors helped a little bit too, but the main author was Thomas Jefferson. They draft, or he drafts, the Declaration of Independence, the big breakup letter. Everybody signs it. John Hancock signs it. He's the first one. It's nice and big signature right in the middle. If you go see it in Washington, it's actually really hard to see now because it's all faded. But that's when this was said, and that's all of the events that if you get asked any questions on the exam, it's going to be about one of those. All right. So this is the build-up. Next is going to be this early part of the war, okay, 1776 to 1778.